For student work, I've chosen examples to help me describe my approach to teaching. Often I'll begin with an initial project to introduce the formal elements of art and design, such as pattern, line, texture, form, shape, tone and colour. Often in themselves they do not form a structure of visual literacy, but rather a foundation on which to build. It's the beginning of being able to read the world rather than simply see it. Here's an example of pattern. The student has chosen to isolate elements and use repetition in a composition which references photographers such as Andreas Gursky. Once the visual building blocks have been established, the next chapter in the student's learning is for them to discover how meaning is created and transferred through visual images. I begin this process by asking the students to consider how written and spoken languages operate as systems of representation. It's a semiotic approach and introduces the notion of objects or things standing in for concepts. And through analysis, using terms such as denotation and connotation, we begin to see how visual artists might create meaning in their work, using objects and images and artifacts to stand in for ideas and concepts. The exploration of metaphor in art and literature often helps students to begin to view a work of art as a text rather than simply something to be passively looked at. In this image, the student demonstrates a sensitivity to composition, part of a project exploring the industrial environment. The next stage is to analyse the work created, to evaluate the strengths, the weaknesses, and apply the knowledge gained to develop further images. As the project progresses, the student starts to find a voice. By this image, the student has started to develop a topographical approach somewhere between traditional documentary and one emphasizing graphic elements. Refining and developing leads towards a fluency in the work and a consistency. Now two images demonstrating a similar compositional structure. However, once the students are able to identify and articulate the codes and conventions of art and photography in their work and the work of others, they become confident to use them purposefully. In this piece of work, an environment has been assembled within a specific space, a box. The objects outside of their normal context are brought together to create a text. And here, a jar, perhaps used to preserve or display a piece of nature. Is it trapped in an urban environment? Or maybe it's protected? We must continually question our response to what is presented. This student moved on to the studio to further develop his ideas. First of all, using a bell jar with its connotations of experiments and specimens to present natural objects out of their context. His final images contrasted the very everyday activity of eating a boiled egg from a boiled egg holder with a stark reminder of life and death. Here, I'd like to pause for a moment to share what I feel is an important development in my approach to teaching, one that's evolved over the past 15 years. When I first started teaching, my aim was clear: to maximise my students' grades, to ensure their best success, and in so doing, ensure my best success. And I did this by taking the exam and the curriculum requirements and presenting them as a process with 4 stages. Going further, I broke each stage down into a set of activities to be worked through as the student progressed through each stage of their project. In a sense, I was aiming to translate the creative process into a step-by-step structure that students could follow. The idea being, if they followed the process, no one would fail. And up to a point, it was very successful. My students had a clear pathway. I could relax knowing that everybody was ticking the boxes. However, after a while, I noticed that in many ways the students came to rely on the structure. What was lacking was perhaps the most important lesson, which was how to think creatively for themselves. So in the end, I concentrated in my teaching on developing the students' ability to work independently. Rather than emphasizing the workbook process, I shifted my focus to 3 words: explore, review, develop. Now, all of the assessment shifted to the student's creative decisions, and the workbook and its process simply formed part of the evidence to back up those decisions. The ability to make creative decisions, to grasp an idea and develop creative solutions, that defines a successful outcome.